Thank you for hitting play on this video. Welcome to my channel called Not I But Him, or Not I But Him and Me, inspired by the verse Galatians 2:20. In this video, I want to break down a scene from one of my favorite movies and add a biblical context to it. But the movie is Karate Kid. Not talking the one with Daniel LaRusso, but the one with Jackie Chan and Jaden Smith. So when Jaden Smith's character, or Dre, comes to China, one of the things or issues he has is, of course, he's trying to fit in, but there's one thing that he struggled with, and that's discipline. Like, he didn't have any manners. He really didn't care much for what his mom was trying to do for him. He was very self-centered. One way he showcased that was every time he would come in the house, he would just take off his coat, throw it on the ground, even though his mom would tell him time and time again to pick up the coat. Now Jackie Chan, who plays the handyman of the apartment they're living in, he noticed this and he was very intrigued. This comes into play because his character ends up saving him from this bully that's been harassing him at the new school he's at. It's a 6-on-1 battle. He steps in, defeats them all, and Dre reaches out to him in a sense for protection or how to learn Kung Fu. He's expecting to learn, all these cool, fighting moves right off the bat. But instead, what he has him doing, he says, take off the coat, put it on the ground, pick it up, hang it on the rack, pick it off the rack, put it back on, take it off. And he just has him repeating this process over and over and over again. And it gets to the point where Dre ends up being fed up and just lashes out at him, accusing him of not knowing real Kung Fu. And the beautiful thing after that, what Dre ends up realizing is that everything that he had been doing up to that point, very tedious process of him taking off the jacket, putting it on the ground, picking it up, putting it on, hanging it up, all these things ended up being useful fighting moves or techniques that were a foundation for the moves that he would later learn throughout the rest of the film. Jackie Chan also mentioned that, Kung Fu is life. So it's not just what he was doing there, but everything that he was learning in that very tedious, monotonous, painful process is something that he could carry on to be successful throughout his entire life. The reason why this scene spoke to me is because it highlights the importance of discipline. Before I get into what the Bible says, it's two forms of discipline. One definition of discipline talks about, punishment or a rebuke after you've done something wrong, whereas the other definition of discipline highlights a process or a building up of good habits, so that way you could then be more successful in whatever area it is. For example, if you want to be healthier physically, it takes, discipline and constantly, eating the right food, getting the right amount of exercise, even getting the right amounts of sleep. It's a retraining or a rewiring, inserting good habits and replacing the bad habits that had you undisciplined. Let me dive in quickly to both definitions using the Bible. In Hebrews 12, verses 5 through 7 stuck out to me. And you have forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons. My son, do not take the Lord's discipline lightly, or lose heart when you are reproved of him. For the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and punishes every son he receives. Endure suffering as discipline. God is dealing with you as sons. For what son is there that a father does not discipline? So a couple things that stick out in that passage is the fact that God's discipline is proof that you are indeed his son, that you are indeed his child. Because just like an earthly father, if you did not receive discipline or repercussions for, the bad decisions that we occasionally make, we will feel more obligated to make those wrong decisions. So occasionally we need that conviction, we need that rebuke to not only tell us that it is wrong, but also to show that that person who is giving you the rebuke or giving you the punishment, for them to show you that they care enough about you to stop you, so that way you don't continue to go on the wrong path. Hence why conviction and repentance is so key to being a Christian and to walking in step with the Spirit, because it's not enough to just be convicted of it. The real key is then seeing the error of your way and then making a complete 180 out of it. If we didn't get knocked down for the decisions we make, or even just life circumstances in general, we would not be able to change our disposition and to grow from our mistakes. We will be more likely to continue making them. In the CSB version, the first part of verse 7 talks about endure suffering as discipline. I feel like that also ties into the second definition that I shared, where it's a training or a process of replacing the bad habits that you have in whatever area of concern and replacing it with good habits, making it a habit of when it comes to suffering, instead of complaining about it and wallowing about it, being prepared to shift your mindset to actually endure the suffering. And not only to endure it, but to, challenge your mind to see the beauty while you are enduring said suffering, and to, be humble about it, to see what could I do? What do I need to work on while I suffer? How can I remain closer to Him? And also, grow in seasons or in moments where I will have to endure suffering. That speaks on the process or rewiring that can be very tough, because suffering is not a pleasant thing. It can be very hard to deal with those things without losing our sense of morale. We often want to go to the worst case scenario, or in some cases even, curse God or blame God for our circumstances. If we change our mind to not only endure it, but to also endure it from a healthy perspective, using His truth, then it allows us to be more disciplined Christians, to still shine or be illuminated, even though we may be surrounded by darkness. Relating that to this particular scene, it had to have been agonizing and grueling for Dre to go through this process over and over and over again, because in the scene, he's doing it when it's super hot outside. He did it when there was storming rain. He did it in the most uncomfortable of situations. In the same sense, we might have to go through, doing monotonous things that at the moment we're not seeing fruit in, and we may get very discouraged. So we may feel like it's all in vain, that nothing is really coming of it. The thing is, we have to trust the process, whether it's our own decisions that have us in that situation. We have to recognize where we went wrong. To be redeemed, first we have to receive that we were actually in the wrong, and then we have to do the work. In Dre's case, he was not allowed to learn the essentials of Kung Fu or to learn the more advanced techniques until he learned the essence of discipline. Without discipline, in anything really, without discipline, you cannot have a foundation. It's likely to crumble, because discipline is composed of many different essential qualities that is needed, from self-control, perseverance, and many more. Those were some major qualities that showed up in him being able to do that over and over and over again. And it also allowed him to gain respect from Mr. Han, because he could have easily quit, even though he did snap out on him. But the fact that he was able to go that far, it did allow him to walk into the next step that Mr. Han had planned for him all along. The next group of verses that stick out to me are verses 11 through 13. It says, "No discipline seems enjoyable at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Therefore, strengthen your tired hands and weakened knees, and make paths straight for your feet, so that what is lame may not be dislocated, but healed instead." Anytime we receive discipline, either our own wrongdoings or just life circumstances, or whether we are retraining our mind to do these positive habits versus the negative ones we have learned for so long, it can be a very grueling process. To be a born-again Christian is taking a lot of peeling back those layers of those habits that you've been doing for so long, that have been, propelled by our fleshly nature. Trying to learn how to do new things and to walk in the Spirit is not easy, because depending on what area of your life you're dealing with, it can be backed up by a lot of trauma, a lot of things that you have to unlearn. That is not an easy task, but it does have a promise. It has a promise that those who stand by it, those who continue to walk in that, will yield a fruit of righteousness. And by that, it means that those who are able to endure will see fruit, and it will allow them to remain in line with the righteous. And as I mentioned in the previous video, those who are considered righteous are those who want to do right by God and And what that looks like is loving what he loves, hating what he hates, and just doing everything in the right mind to be in alignment with the laws and statutes that he has. Sacrificing their own well-being and their own lives so that way they could be more like him instead of being more like ourselves. And then I like how it moves forward. I feel like verses 12 and 13 is just an exhortation. Even though I just told you that this process of discipline is painful, I'm urging you to continue going. Like, I just gave you this promise that it's gonna be painful, but you will receive a reward. Therefore, because I just told you this, I'm expecting you to continue to move forward on this path of discipline. Because it acknowledges that yes, your hands are tired, your knees are weak, but you must strengthen it. And when I think of strengthening something that's already weak, is to continue going in it. To build muscle, you have to work out the muscle to the point where it is tired, to where it is painful. Because if you don't push the muscle to that point, then there's no way that it can grow. In the same sense, when it comes into enduring the trials and the discipline that comes from that in this life, we just give up before we allow ourselves to get to that place, then we're not allowing ourselves to grow from that. Because we give up, we don't even give it to God or ask him to give us the power to endure the trials that we have in this life. One thing I realize is that we've all had our share of tough situations that we dealt with in the past. But even though it sucks in the moment, when you look back at it and you're actually able to push through, you be like, man, I can't believe I went through that, but I'm so glad I made it to the other side. Once you see those positives, it enables you so that way, if you're ever in a similar trial, you already know what to do. Or even if it's a totally different trial, you'll be like, I've been here before. I faced a tough situation like this. And therefore, I'm confident that I can make it to the other side, no matter how long the trial may be. First part of verse 13 sticks out too, because it says, make straight paths for your feet. When you relate it to the Bible, it talks about, the straight and narrow path. Proverbs constantly talks about, do not veer off from the path of evil, but stay on the narrow path. Do not stray away. In times when we're being disciplined, or in times when we're trying to become disciplined, it could be really easy to veer off, because if you're being disciplined, you may, become frustrated or irritated at the fact that you're going through this hard season, that you might feel pressured to go back to old things that you used to go to for comfort. Or when it comes to, when you're trying to discipline yourself and to build better habits, you might feel like this isn't growing fast enough. I'm just going to go back to my old ways because it's much easier to do that. Relating it to Dre, what he realized is the constant process with the coat actually enabled him to learn some of the basics of Kung Fu. And it showed in the scene where they were sparring with one another. He was able to punch, kick, hit, all while using the same techniques that he used from picking up the coat. Also, what it did was it translated to the rest of the movie. So now instead of him throwing his coat on the ground, every time he came in the house from then on out, he hung up the coat. And there's a scene or two where it actually shows her like smiling at that. So not only is he learning to be a better fighter, but he's also learning how to be a better person as well, because of the discipline he received and also the action of discipline from him wanting to be a better fighter, so that way he could be able to stand up for himself. Verse 13 applies to Dre because the opponents that he's going up against, they're very similar to Cobra Kai in a sense, if you follow the Karate Kid series. And they're always talking about no mercy exists in everything, no pain. They're kind of low down and dirty. They were trying to attack Dre even before the tournament, though the senseis agreed that wasn't going to happen. In the final tournament, they're doing low down, dirty tricks. And of course, just like the original Karate Kid, they tried to hurt Dre so that way they would win by default. It would have been very easy for Dre to stoop down low to their tactics as well in order to retaliate. But what he did was he stayed on the straight and narrow path and stayed true to everything that was instilled in him from the discipline that he was receiving from Mr. Han. And in the end, that's what allowed him to endure and to grow by not only winning the fight, but if they had continued with a second one, it would have allowed him to potentially, grow more as a fighter and maybe instill that into a future fighter that he could potentially disciple as well. When you think about it, it ties into testimonies and discipleship, because when we're able to endure whatever trials that we're facing, and we make it out on the other side, the power of that is that we can help somebody who is going through a very similar trial. Why? Because we actually been through that. although we are different people, this is how I got over it. And because I got over it, I believe that you can too. And then it's up to that person to receive that and to walk in that. But what matters is your testimony plants a seed into that person. And it's up to them to receive it, so that way God can then water it, which is such a powerful thing. When it comes to discipleship, that process of having experienced both the Lord's discipline and then, becoming more disciplined in your faith and just in your life in general, those habits are things that you can impart on to, a younger believer, or even, somebody who you're very close with, where you guys are neck and neck. It's a iron sharpens iron ordeal where you guys are like constantly sharpening each other, so that way you can grow in the faith and you can help those in those times, so that way they can remain disciplined and to remain encouraged, even though they may be going through a season where they're receiving discipline. I wanted to do a video like this for a while, and I actually have a couple more videos that will follow this same format. So I hope that you guys took away something great from this, and I really appreciate the support. But just like the channel name implies, it is not me, but it is him and me. So every revelation that is granted, everything that you receive from this, give him the glory instead, because it is not I, but him and me. So thank you for watching this video, and God bless you.